Lots to talk about regarding key second-year defenseman Calijah Kancey. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you Monday through Friday. I'm only here Wednesday through Friday this week, but generally Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message, and you could have watched me melt down in real time over the Steven Stamkos news. You can become an insider over at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Lots to talk about today regarding second-year defensive lineman Calijah Kancey, and we are going to start things off with Sports Illustrated naming him their player to watch for the 2024 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Matt Verderame of Sports Illustrated is going through all 32 teams in 32 days. And he recently wrote a column about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And in that column, Verderame goes through their biggest gamble, their toughest stretch over the course of the schedule, the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and his ranking of the head coach quarterback duo. He also named his breakout player of the season and named defensive lineman Calijah Kancey as just that for the Buccaneers, saying, quote, Kancey is a good bet to become a star in 2024. The Buccaneers spent a first-round pick on the University of Pittsburgh defensive tackle in 2023 and watched as he registered 4 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, and 12 quarterback hits as a rookie. Historically speaking, even the best defensive tackles don't see their stats pop until their second seasons. In Kansas City, Chris Jones only had 2 sacks as a rookie before notching 6.5 in his sophomore year. Jeffrey Simmons only had 5 in his first 2 seasons combined before increasing to 8.5 in his third year. It takes time, but Kancey flashed all the necessary tools, end quote. As a rookie, Kancey played in 14 games, finished with 26 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 1 pass defense, and 12 quarterback hits. He also finished 10th in the AP Defensive Rookie of the Year voting. And it's not hard to see why Kancey is a solid pick for breakout player. Even having missed a lot of time in training camp and some time during the regular season due to injury, there was a stark difference in the Buccaneers' play on defense when Kancey was on the field. He isn't always going to light up the stat sheet, but neither does Vita Vea. That's something David and I have talked about for years. But their impact is felt in other ways, whether it's stuffing run lanes, eating up blockers for blitzing players, collapsing the pocket, forcing bad throws, or forcing the quarterback to throw the ball away. His presence is very much felt every single snap that he takes. Last year, those snaps accounted for just 62% of the total snaps that the team took on defense. I would estimate that that number is going to jump closer to the 80% mark if he doesn't get injured. He turned just 23 earlier this year and hasn't even scratched the surface of what he's capable of. Alongside Vita, and hopefully with Logan Hall improving his play, this defensive line is going to be an incredibly difficult one to manage for opposing offensive lines and offensive coordinators. Think about this for a minute. Think about Kancey's ability to eat up blocks along the edge. More often than not, Kancey is going to be battling a tackle and a guard. Meanwhile, you're going to have Vita Vea, the centerpiece of that defensive line. We know what he can do, and he's going to be dealing with the double teams from a center and the other guard. That leaves Logan Hall one-on-one, which is an area where he really has to elevate his game coming into this season and take advantage of that opportunity. If you have 3 down linemen and you got 2 of them taking on double teams and you're the one-on-one guy, those numbers, that production, that impact has to go way, way up. What Logan Hall has been doing so far just isn't going to cut it. And if he doesn't elevate his game this year, the Bucs could be looking to replace him in next year's draft on day 1 or day 2, depending on how free agency shakes out. That's a long ways away. But those are the expectations for Logan Hall. And a lot of that falls on the shoulders and the abilities of Vita Vea and Calijah Kancey going into his second year. Beyond all of that, Todd Bowles loves to blitz. You all know how much Todd Bowles loves to blitz, loves to send those extra guys, loves to disguise what he's doing, bring pressure from areas where it doesn't look like he's going to be bringing pressure, but he's going to send guys like Levante David, Antoine Winfield Jr., Christian Izzy, and Tyke Smith, Jordan Whitehead. He's going to send them on those blitzes behind Kancey in order to take advantage of the brief rushing lane that Kancey provides because of those double teams, create an impact getting after the quarterback and creating some takeaways. Oh, and by the way, Yaya Diaby happens to be lining up behind Calijah Kancey. That in and of itself is also going to create opportunities, not just for Kancey, but also for those blitzing players that Todd Bowles wants to send. If that tackle has to go and deal with Yaya Diaby, now all of a sudden you got Kancey one-on-one against a guard. He's going to win that matchup 9 times out of 10. You're going to have a lot of issues with these opposing offensive lines trying to find the right matchups to really solidify the left side of that line where they have Kancey and Diaby plus additional blitzers coming all at once. There's only so many guys that can block and can get in front of these pass rushers. And more often than not, the Bucs, when healthy, have the athletic ability and the sheer power to overtake those blockers, giving Calijah Kancey, Yaya Diaby, and blitzing players those absolutely beautiful opportunities to get after the quarterback, disrupt the play, force bad throws, force throwaways, and of course, create takeaways. That's really where the Bucs defense is going to make its money, is creating those takeaways and flipping the field, stealing a possession away from the opposing offense. They did a decent job of that last year as a whole on the defensive side of the ball. But again, those numbers have to go up this year, especially given some of the offenses that they're going to be facing. Philadelphia, Kansas City, San Francisco, even Atlanta to a certain extent. Those kinds of offenses, if you can steal a possession away, you can steal the game. It is going to be imperative for these guys to win their matchups. And Calijah Kancey has all the makings, all the ability to take a giant leap in year 2 compared to what he did as a rookie last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Going to jump into the live chat real quick. We have lots of people excited that they made the live. We got Insider David's in there, Rodzilla, Dakilla, Randy, Richard, Bo, all in there. Richard says Kancey, Vita, and Yaya, that trio is going to be dangerous. Absolutely. Also, Richard, vacationing in Honolulu this week. Well, what are you doing watching me? You should be sitting on the beach, drinking, sipping on a drink, enjoying the beauty that is Honolulu, Hawaii. But I appreciate you being here nonetheless. You're already here. Don't leave now. But I hope you guys have an amazing time out in Hawaii. Love Thyself. That seems to be a new one in the live chat. Welcome aboard. Says Sapp had 3 sacks rookie year while playing 16 and started 8 games. Year 2, 9 sacks, starting 14, playing 15. Love that comparison. Hopefully Calijah Kancey turns into what Warren Sapp was. I think if we're talking about a season where Calijah Kancey has 9 sacks, we're talking about a very, very successful 2024 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and especially the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. So yeah, another year under Calijah's belt, and hopefully 100% in terms of his health, and he is going to be an absolute steamroller for this defense. But Kancey also had plenty to say about himself and the quarterback of the Buccaneers as a guest on Jim Rome. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. You want to catch an upcoming Rays game? Tickets when they host the Yankees start at $56. Then they host the Guardians, where tickets start at $22. In their homestand against the Cincinnati Reds, you can get tickets starting at $34. Right now, you can get Buccaneers regular season tickets as low as $50, or see the return of Steven Stamkos at Amalie Arena when the Nashville Predators come to town, starting at $192. But all of these prices feature Game Time's all-in pricing, so there won't be any surprise fees when you get to check out. You can wait until the last minute when prices drop by as much as 60%, or you can buy them now knowing you have Game Time's lowest price guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time's going to credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Download Game Time today. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I will be dropping an episode on the 4th of July. I am going to get into my all-time greatest Buccaneers list. I think we're going to cut it from a top 15 to a top 10. I'm going to bring you the first 5 on the 4th of July, and then the top 5 essentially on Friday. In the meantime, if you want to hear the latest news from around all sports, NBA free agency, NFL free agency, NFL news, because the NFL never sleeps. You got soccer, you got the PGA, you have the WNBA, you have baseball, but you want to hear more than just the national narratives, and you want the biggest stories without the fake manufactured screaming. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without the screaming. Locked On Sports today is streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Calijah Kancey was a guest on the Jim Rome show, and Rome asked him how much freer he expects to play in his second season. Kancey said, quote, "Now that I got a full offseason under my belt, not really dealing with the draft process, I'm able to heal, take a little break, take care of my body. I feel like this year's going to be special. I had time to rest, and then I also had time to master the playbook, and I had something to feed off of, because going into my rookie year, I didn't know what to expect or how things would go my first year. By me going through a full year, I now have something to feed off of to get better," end quote. I talked about it a little bit already, but it can't be said or stressed enough. The health of Calijah Kancey is going to be vital to the success of the Buccaneers defense this season. And look, I love William Golston. I'm thrilled that he's back in the fold this year. Mike Green has shown little flashes here and there. Greg Gaines came back for another year in Tampa. Judge Culpepper is a sleeper candidate, in my opinion, to make the roster as an undrafted free agent. But the drop-off that you have from Calijah Kancey to any of those depth pieces is massive. You know that those guys are going to be rotated in and out here and there when Kancey needs a breather, when Vita needs a breather, or Logan Hall. But if you're relying on those guys to take all of Kancey's snaps, in some sort of rotation, because he's out with an injury or he goes down in the fourth quarter of a close game, and you need to rely on one of these guys to come in and close things out in crunch time, it could be really, really bad news. His combination of speed, size, power, get off, his ability to shed blocks with his hands is the reason that the Buccaneers used their first round pick last year to bring him in. If they had a guy on the roster that could do the things that Calijah Kancey can do, then he would be somewhere else. The Bucs would have used their pick elsewhere and gotten a different player at a different position. Knowing that he's feeling good, knowing that he's healthy heading into training camp, knowing that he's mastered this playbook and he knows how he can build off of last year, how he can improve over last year, that should really bring a smile to a lot of Bucs fans' faces. But that wasn't all that Kancey talked about. Rome also asked him, of course, about Baker Mayfield, who we're going to talk more about in just a little bit. But Rome asked him about that quarterback, and Kancey said, quote, Baker is a guy you would want to run through a wall for. He's a guy that is going to leave it out on the line. He's very competitive. He's a great guy overall, helps out in the community. He's willing to give his lives to anyone on the team or anyone in general. He's just a baller. He's a dog, end quote. Now, we've talked about it a lot on this show before, reacting to other people, talking about it in the live chat where I see you guys are having yourselves a discussion right now. We've talked about it a lot, but for some reason, people still don't get this. This Buccaneers team, this Buccaneers organization loves Baker Mayfield. Stuff like this is the reason that the Bucs gave him the big money deal that they did. The offensive players love him and what he brings to that side of the ball. The defensive players love him because they know he's willing to rip himself in half if it's going to help the team, and they respect that. You can tell when you're watching a team and they're shown on these sideline shots during the broadcast. You can tell which teams respect their quarterback and which ones don't. You could honestly tell, if you want to go back and check it out, but you could tell down the stretch of Jameis Winston's time with the Buccaneers that the players were over it. They were out. They were done. You could tell in Denver and the last year or so with Seattle that Russell Wilson's teammates were over it. They were checked out. Daniel Jones in New York, Kenny Pickett last year in Pittsburgh. The Bucs don't have that situation going on. The front office, the coaches, all the players are all in on Baker Mayfield. He's a guy's guy, and his teammates respond to that. How many other quarterbacks are going over to the defensive players to warm up with them and do some drills with them? For those that haven't been to training camp and you see the offense goes to one side, the defense goes to one side, the position groups stay with the position groups, not Baker. He'll go over and he'll start working out with the defensive players from the jump. How many other quarterbacks do you hear about that bounce around from position group to position group in the lunchroom to get everyone involved, to get to know every single player on that football team? The answer is not many. Those guys rally around Baker because he's one of them. Kancey wasn't around during the Brady years, so Baker is the only NFL quarterback that he has been around, but his quote speaks volumes. That whole team will run through a wall and lay it all on the line for their quarterback because they know at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, their quarterback is going to do the same for them. And again, you can go down the list of quarterbacks in the NFL that are not that guy, that are not going to do those things for everyone on their team, that they will preserve their own self-interest first. Going to jump into the live chat real quick before we move on. Old School in the chat says, I can't freaking wait. Go Bucs. Flash Gordon in the chat says, Calijah had 4 regular season sacks on a shortened season, then 2 sacks in a postseason, in the postseason against good offensive lines. 100%, no doubt about that. Love Thyself. Been watching you guys for 2 years or so, but hardly ever get to catch you live. Appreciate your support. Appreciate you being able to jump in on the live. Hopefully, this is just the first of many that you are able to join in on. Richard says, hit that like button, Bucks peeps. Yes, please. Thank you, Richard. Thanks to all of you that hit that like button. And then Flash says PFF hates Calijah. They give him a 49 overall rating. They say he couldn't stop the run, but then note that he has so many stops behind the line of scrimmage. Pro Football Focus, for what they are, for what they do, they are a great tool to utilize. But for a lot of you everydayers, you long timers, you guys know that they're not, to me, the end all be all of football analysis, but they are a solid tool to use by comparison to other outlets that you can kind of see who's looking at what, how they view different people in what lenses. So I don't put too much stock into the overall grades, and that really started with me the year that oh my goodness, who was it? there was a quarterback that only played in like 3 games all year, and I believe they went 0-3, and they had a higher overall grade as a rookie than OJ Howard did. And I said, you know what? That's it. These grades, you can kind of throw them out the window because nobody understands what is going on with them or why they are the way that they are. As per usual, not everyone feels the same way as Calijah Kancey or the rest of the Buccaneers about number 6. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a live episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And we're going to take this episode full circle. Let's go back to Sports Illustrated's Matt Verderame and his breakdown of the Buccaneers. At the top of the show, I mentioned some of the categories that Verderame covered in his preview, and one of them was the Bucs' biggest gamble this offseason. Verderame's pick was signing Baker Mayfield long-term, and he said, quote, Mayfield came to the Buccaneers after playing for 3 teams in 2 seasons. His career was on proverbial life support after an ugly 2022 season that included stops with the Panthers and Los Angeles Rams. Then suddenly he posted 4,044 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, an NFC South title, and a playoff win. The result? Mayfield got a 3-year deal worth $100 million with half guaranteed. It's not an enormous commitment by modern standards, but enough to invest 2 years into a quarterback with an uneven background. If Mayfield plays as he did last season, it's great value. If he reverts back to his previous form without Canales, it could spell doom, end quote. Here's my question. Which pre-Canales form are we talking about? The pre-Canales form that threw for 3,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, completed 62.8% of his passes on the way to the divisional round in the AFC in the playoffs? Or is it the pre-Canales form where he played all year with a busted shoulder? Or is it the pre-Canales form where he was traded late to a dumpster fire organization in Carolina with a dead man walking at head coach before being shipped off to Los Angeles, where beer vendors were being called up to play receiver because they were dealing with so many injuries? Which pre-Canales form are we discussing? Also, let me take a moment to pause here and say, I like Dave Canales. I thought some of what he did last year was good, but can we pump the brakes a little bit on the Dave Canales is some sort of quarterback genius guru who's going to turn around the entire fate of the Carolina Panthers franchise and turn Bryce Young into Patrick Mahomes Part 2? Like, can we just chill? Let's see how that plays out. Ultimately, it just doesn't seem to ever end. People want to overlook the good that Baker Mayfield has done and the great play that he has had in favor of searching for confirmation bias and being able to see See, I told you he wasn't a starting quarterback anymore. At the end of the day, that's what most people really want out of this. They don't want to be wrong about Baker, especially 2 years in a row. So they're starting to hedge their bets and saying he got his money, which is fine if he repeats last year, but just wait for the downfall so I can say I told you so. That's the long and the short of it. And Verderame hedges again, talking about his best and worst case scenarios in this team preview. For the best case scenario, he listed that as Mayfield continues to improve, Bucs contend, saying, quote, if the roster performs as it did in 2023, with Mayfield going from good to borderline top 10, Tampa Bay can not only win the South again, but contend in a conference long on uncertainty and short on definite contenders, end quote. However, then we get to the worst case scenario, which was listed as offense struggles and age hinders the roster, where Verderame says, quote, furthermore, should Mayfield regress, the offense isn't equipped to succeed in another capacity. The run game ranked last in yards per game, 88.8 last season, and nothing changed in the personnel. Mayfield needs to continue being the focal point, end quote. First off, yes, plenty changed in the personnel. They have a new starting center, they have a new starting left guard, and they have a new running back too in Bucky Irving, or at least I'm predicting a new running back too. At the very least, they have another running back in the mix that was not there last year. So 3 pivotal parts of that rushing personnel change. Let's get that record straight right now. Also, by the way, fun little tidbit, his head coach quarterback duo ranking for Mayfield and Todd Bowles was 20th in the league. He has Baker Mayfield listed as his 19th ranked quarterback. This is where the Bucs want to be, just like last year. Jason Light said it. Levante David has mentioned it. Bowles, Baker, Rashad White, lots of these players and coaches and front office executives talk about the outside noise and how they don't pay attention to it. Trust me, they're paying attention. Not only are they paying attention, they're keeping receipts. They are Ryan Howard from The Office gif with their little notepad jotting down their list of names. That chip on their shoulder grows bigger by the day. And this team is on a mission, and Baker Mayfield is on a mission to not just shut everyone up, but to improve on last year's finish and finally remove all doubt as to who they are. Going to jump into the live chat one more time before we get out of here. Old School in the chat says, just bought tickets for the Raiders at Tampa. The fees alone are $111 per ticket. Let's get real. Holy moly. Go to Game Time, man. Go to Game Time. All in pricing. You're going to get some great deals over there. I promise you. I don't just say it because they are a sponsor of the show. I use Game Time regularly. Used it to get Celtics tickets for my youngest son. Used it to get Lightning tickets for my older son. My dad and I used it to go see Illinois and Ohio State play basketball back in January. I've used them for concerts and going to use them to see the Nashville Predators and the Chicago Blackhawks in January when we have to go down to Nashville for a tournament for my son. So I'm telling you, trust me, I tried and true. I have the receipts to prove it. Flash in the chat says, I expect Baker Mayfield to be better than he was last year. I am 100% with you. And something else that I've talked about on the show in the past, I do kind of expect his interception numbers to climb a little bit. Nothing egregious, but it could go up to 12, maybe 13. But I also expect him to set a career high in passing touchdowns yet again this season. I think he's going to surpass the 30 touchdown mark, going to get up over 42, maybe even 4,300 passing yards. All those numbers are going to climb overall, even with additional interceptions. Still believe that the sack numbers are going to come down a little bit with the revamping of the offensive line. So all in all, his season, I believe, will be better than it was last year. And of course, you add in an additional year with the team. That chemistry's been built. He's not looking over his shoulder. All those other factors that play into it. We're in for a really, really good year out of Baker Mayfield. Lucas in the chat says Bucs will be the most improved run game of the year. Graham Barton, whether it's Ben Bredesen or Sua Opeta on the left side, Cody Mauch getting to build on 1 year, just like Kancey talked about. He knows what to expect now. He knows where he needs to improve. It's not like he's walking in blind anymore. Not going to hit that rookie wall. We expect improvement there. Rachaad White, already one of the better running backs in the NFL. I think he has the opportunity to solidify his spot as a top 10 back in the National Football League. The addition of Bucky Irving, hopefully a healthy Chase Edmonds all season long. You're spot on. Spot on, Lucas. The Bucs. All right, fine. Bold prediction on July 3rd. The Buccaneers are going to have a top 20 rushing offense this season. On that note, I'm going to get out of here before I say anything else that can be used against me. Please check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes, either on YouTube or wherever you're listening to your podcast. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. If you're subscribed on YouTube, click that notification button. Make sure that you're getting notified so that every time I go live, you can jump into the chat and join all the fun in there. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.